Hello everyone, my name is Julie Cerrone. I'm the Patient Leader Network Director here at WeGo Health. And welcome to another Patient Leader webinar. And tonight's is about podcasting. Now, I gotta tell you, subject that I keep getting pinged about. Like, how do I start a podcast? How can I use a podcast to really get my message out there? Last year's awards, Shane actually had the huge task of interviewing a lot of our finalists and had some great podcasts. And we've been releasing the winner podcasts on the WeGo Health blog the last few weeks. So stay tuned. The next one will be coming up next week. So be on the lookout for that. But Shane has been giving us a lot of advice about podcasting. So we're really excited to have him here tonight to talk. So without further ado, I'm going to switch it over to Shane so he can drop some knowledge on us.
That's a heck of an introduction. I am Shan Schultz. I am the founder of the Speaking the Heart Radio Network. I did not start that way. I started out with my own podcast, which was Arisen Strength, and it was with my good buddy, Wayne the Hacker, who is one of our guests here today. We decided that taking our conversations that we had at the dinner table and a couple hours before, a couple hours after, and we decided to actually take them onto the internet. Well, the best way to do that, we thought, was to go ahead and start a podcast. So we started our own podcast called Arisen Strength. And so, that's how it all started. It started in 2013. And then I launched the Speaking of the Heart Radio Network in November of 2015. The reason why I started the Speaking of the Heart Network is because what I wanted to do was I wanted to take the people that we were having onto our show with Arisen Strength to be able to have a platform to be role models for those who are my audience with Arisen Strength. I wanted them to be able to show that we believe that people are more than the challenges that they face. Everybody is special and unique in their own special way. And so when we were having people coming onto the show to be interviewed, recognizing a lot of talent, a lot of creativity, a lot of capabilities that were kind of being suppressed on the inside because they just didn't have a pathway to be able to express what it is that they were doing or wanted to do. So I decided to go ahead and build the Speaking of the Heart Radio Network, and that is how we do things now. The idea of the Speaking of the Heart Network is, to bring purpose and passion to those who need it most again. And, we're doing our very best in order to focus specifically to the WeGo Health audience, because we're looking at people who are going through some different challenges, some different struggles in life, that seems to rob us of what it is that makes us special and unique. So that is why it is that we decided to build the Speaking the Heart Radio Network. It's made up of a bunch of different podcasts. I've actually had managed over 10 different podcasts in my career. I've been a host or a guest on podcasts, a little over 200 episodes. I have been a producer or director on podcast for now 300 episodes. So whether it be, producing it, or whether it be through distribution, promotion, management, whatever the case may be, I have a pretty extensive history in podcasting because I decided to do that. Now, I personally deal with a lot of different challenges of my own, whether it be medically or mentally. And so, what I do is that I was somebody who was going out, and specifically I was talking to different hospitals, organizations, and clinics regards to mental health, from a mental health standpoint, from a patient's point of view. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring those concepts that Wayne and I came up with, and we brought them to the podcast world. So let's get started. And I'm glad that everybody decided to come in and join us here tonight. So what is a podcast? Well, a podcast is really pretty simple. I mean, it's in the family of a radio live show, but it does have some differences to it. For instance, a live show is normally done on radio. Normally, it's done right on that given time. You get what you get. There's not normally an archive that has that radio show there for the listener to be able to listen to later on down the road. And it's also, regulated in a different way. Podcasting is where you're able to take audio content or video content or both, and be able to upload it so as to be distributed to either another source, another listening source, or the archive so that the listener can actually go to. That's really the difference between the two. Another thing about podcasting is that it allows you to be focused in specific areas, where when it comes to radio, a lot of the times they're appealing to a general audience. So they are trying to get out to the masses that are out there. Podcasting, you can actually focus in on what it is that you're trying to get across, or the message that you're looking to get across. Why should you be looking into podcasting? I could tell you a bunch of statistics that would say why it is that you should get into podcasting. There are a bunch of statistics that will tell you that podcasting is growing more and more each year. For instance, it's actually grown over 21% since 2013. What does that mean? It means a lot to those who are like myself, who actually have a network and you're trying to focus in on what it is that you're doing. As far as being a health advocate, though, it's really not helping me much. So let me give you some statistics that might be helpful. Over 100 million US podcast listeners are out there. Now, what that means is that over 1/3 of the United States population, okay, specific to 12 and over, are listening to podcasting. So do you think that somebody who might be part of your audience, or somebody who's following your advocacy, might be part of that 100 million? Obviously, the answer is a clear yes. 75% of podcast listens are from the home or from the car. Now, again, let's focus in on WeGo Health. The WeGo Health customer or consumer is generally dealing with a lot of different challenges, whether it be illness, whether it be pain related, or whatever the case may be. So they are often going to be at home, whether for disability or just because they just don't feel well, or they're going to be in the car on their way to the appointment that's going to be able to help them for what it is that they're going through. So again, this is focusing into the actual audience that you're looking to get to. 93% of podcast listeners are active on social media. Again, let's look at it from the standpoint of a health advocate. Health advocacy is very large when it comes to social media, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any number of different ways that you would go ahead and use social media to your advantage. 93% of the podcasting listeners are active on that social media that you're promoting on. So again, you're getting right to your audience members. Those are the people that you want to get to, so as to be able to get your message out to the more people that you can. Here's a question that I get a lot. Is it expensive? Because don't you have to do a whole lot of things like buy a mic, or do you have to have a studio like you have, or do you have to, get software, and more questions that can just absolutely confuse somebody. The bottom line is that yes, there are different tiers when it comes to podcasting, but please don't let that deter you from starting. Like I said, I started with earbuds. I'm wearing them right now. These are the exact same earbuds that I used when I started my first podcast. So, you have a set of earbuds, you put it into your computer, and you're onto the system, whether it be Google Hangout, or Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker, or any number of different sources that you're able to broadcast live, and you've got a podcast. Now, of course, there are going to be times as to where you're going to say, okay, well, I want to go up another level. And that's great. It actually is wonderful to be able to have a gradual step to where you can actually improve over time. So, but don't let it deter you by saying, okay, is it too expensive? All right, I know you're excited about this. I know you're excited about getting the podcast out. Here's the thing. Slow your roll, okay? I'm not trying to tease you here, okay? There's somebody that is in your family that has once said, listen, you only have one opportunity in order to be able to make a first impression. It's no different in podcasting. Podcasting is the exact same. The podcasting world, it's very competitive. There's a lot of podcasts that are out there, whether it be iTunes. iTunes has over 250,000 different podcasts that are out there. But again, we don't care about those numbers because what we're doing is a purpose. We're trying to get a message out there for what it is that we know about firsthand. So the thing is that you want to slow your roll. You want to get it to the point as to where you're going to have you want to get it to the point as to where you're going to have the first impression be the best impression. Here are 3 things that you want to talk about when you're making your podcast. Number 1, what is your message? What's your message? Because if you don't know your message, it's going to be very difficult for your audience to know what it is that you're talking about. Are you trying to get across of what it is about, what it is that you're going through? Are you trying to get across of what it is that, that you've experienced? Are you trying to get across of, in a general aspect of, like, we're talking about the WeGo Health Network, which is patient leaders and patient advocates. Are you talking about pharmaceutical efforts? Are you talking about doctor efforts? Are you talking about national policy when it comes to healthcare? So a good friend of mine, Barbie, from the International Pain Foundation, very, very well adept into going into the national portion of things when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to chronic pain. So this is what you want to do. You want to get your message, you want to get it focused so that your audience can identify with you. Number 2, who is your audience? Big, big thing, okay? And I can tell you this from my own personal experience, because I made a big mistake in the first place. I started out a podcast called Arisen Strength. Now, I had no intention of starting a podcast when I wrote Arisen Strength. Arisen Strength is actually a motivational piece that I wrote back in 2013. And so it is all about, going from despair to possibility to purpose. And it literally leads somebody to realize that I have decided to take it on my shoulders in order to be able to help others realize that they're more than the challenges that they face. So I wrote it as Arisen Strength. Now, we went ahead and we started our podcast. It was known as Arisen Strength, and people started thinking that it was a religious podcast. Now, I have nothing against religion for anybody. I'm a very spiritual person myself, but I believe that it's a one-on-one thing. So, I really didn't build it in order to be a religious podcast. I built it to be a motivating podcast, an inspiring one that's going to bring somebody from another level to another level to another level. So what we had to do is that we had to go back and we had to rebrand what it is that we were doing. And we then changed it to Arisen Strength, the motivational podcast. Now notice, we didn't get real cute with it, right? We actually came out and said, hey, it's a motivational podcast. So we don't want anybody to try to have to think. We want to make sure that they understand what it is that we're doing. And that way you have your audience identifying who it is that you are and what it is that you're doing. How does your audience benefit from your show? Very, very important. You see, the thing is, there are a lot of podcasts that are out there that it seems as if like people are just talking to hear themselves talk. Again, this is focusing in on the WeGo Health Network, the experts, the patient leaders, the patient advocates, the people who are out there trying to make a difference for others. You want your audience member to benefit from your show in some way. You want them to be able to identify with who it is that you are, what it is that you're doing. So you want them to understand, but you also want them to feel as they're part of what it is that you're doing. And the only way they can do that is if they feel some sort of benefit. When it comes to our show, Arisen Strength, I'll mention Arisen Strength. I went ahead and said, okay, it's a motivational podcast. It's about inspiration through awareness and motivation. So we went ahead and we have a bunch of interviews talking about awareness. We have some interviews in regards to motivation. I'm a motivational speaker. So again, we have a combination of things. That way, my audience knows they're going to be taken from where they are now and brought to another level. That's how they benefit from the show being itself. Another great example is you want to be authentically you, okay? You don't want to be something that you're not. You don't want to go ahead and say that you know, that you're this grandiose person and everything in that sense when you're not. You want to be authentic because, again, you want your audience member to identify with you. They don't want to know what it is that your dream is. They want to know who it is that you are, especially when we're talking about what it is that we're talking about. The old saying is that, well, you don't know what it is that I'm going through, or walk into my shoes for an hour, or walk into my shoes for a day. They want to be authentic. They want you to be who it is that you are. There are times, even though that I'm a motivational speaker, there are times that I deal with depression. I've dealt with depression throughout my entire life. I've dealt with depression, borderline personality disorder, PTSD, suicidality, and yet I'm a motivational speaker. I don't go out of my way and say everything motivating. I will do everything that I can in order to inspire people, but at the same time, I'm very real. So when we go ahead and we're on the show, there are times where I say, listen, I'm having a tough time, or listen, I'm going through a tough time, or listen, this is what it is that I'm going through, but I'm working my way through it, and we'll see where we go from there. I'm very authentic with what it is I'm doing. I'm very transparent. And that's a word that Wayne and I really wanted to get across, is that we wanted to be transparent so that people know that we are the real deal. Another example here is Joelle the Lupus Diva May. Joelle is a wonderful, wonderful person. She is very inspirational. We had her on the show with Arisen Strength to talk about lupus awareness. And as I was talking to her, I realized that this was some dynamic personality that was on the other end. And so Joelle is not only dealing with lupus, but she also is pursuing her certification in regards to physical fitness and nutrition. So what we did is we built the show, the Health and Wellness Project with the Lupus Diva May. Again, it's authentic. This is who Joelle is about. She's all about physical fitness and she's all about nutrition. We don't want to screw around with that. So we just went with the Health and Wellness Project with the Lupus Diva May. This is Claudia Israel. Claudia Israel is actually my old therapist. It's the therapist that I believe helped me the most. And so what I decided to do is that I built a show around what Claudia did. My impression was, if it helped me, then it can help others. So we went ahead and we built the show, The Mindset, with Claudia Israel and myself as a co-host. And our slogan, or our tag is that your mindset can be your very best ally instead of your own personal enemy. This is one of our shows that we just recently launched. It's from Ross McCreary, and it's called Painfully Optimistic, Life's More Than Pain. Well, you'll notice that optimistic is kind of spelled in a different way. Again, we wanted to be authentic. Ross's URL to his website of Painfully Optimistic, he wasn't able to get optimistic with the I in, being the correct spelling. So he went with optimistic. We followed right along with it. Again, his followers can understand that. His followers know exactly what it is that's going on. They know exactly what it is that's Ross is about. Anybody who knows Ross, he is all about doing things, even though that he goes through a lot of different struggles. He has chronic pain, chronic illness, and he deals with depression. So he's dealing with a lot of different pain in his life. But he wants to get it across that there's more to life than pain. So what we do, we put the tag onto it, life's more than pain. Again, who's your audience? This is what it is that you want to get across to your audience. That way, once you figure it out, whether it be 5 people, whether it be 10 people, or whether it be 1,000 people, the best way to start is to start with that person that can identify with who it is that you are. You are better off having a smaller number of people following you in a way that they can identify with, than to have 1,000 people who are going to be in and out and not really participating with what it is that you're doing. So again, you want to be as authentic as you can. Again, here it is. This is the example of what I was talking about with Arisen Strength. We started it out as Arisen Strength, and people started thinking Arisen, they automatically thought that it was religious. We changed it and we made it into a motivational podcast. So again, we're focusing in on what it is that our audience is looking for, what our audience can identify with. We don't want to confuse them. We want to get it so that we can get that group specifically focused on what it is that we're doing so that we can do the show the best way that we can. Now, how does your audience benefit? Well, here's the thing. You want to develop a style, right? You want to be authentic, like I said, but you want to be somewhat creative, but you don't want to be too cute, all right? So while being creative, you still want to be focused on the wording that you're using. You still want to be thinking about your audience. How is your audience benefiting from it? Are they going to make a difference in their life in some way? Do they feel like they are a part of something? Do they feel as if like you're uplifting them? Do they feel as if like you understand? This is what it is that you want to get into your mindset so that you can go ahead and create the best show for your audience. So again, what is your message? Who is your audience? And how does your audience benefit from your show? This is actually a webinar, is the first webinar that we're going to have of 2. This is what it is that we really want to get across, is that we want people to understand that you want to do these things. You want to go home. If you're thinking about doing a podcast, you want to bring these 3 questions up so that you can figure out what it is that you're doing. Our second webinar is going to be talking a little bit more in detail. It's going to think about, okay, what about equipment? Where's distribution? How it is that we would do production so as to be able to get to that point. But the first thing that you want to do is that you want to build a following based off of what it is that you're thinking about doing as your podcast. What is your message? Who is your audience? And how does your audience benefit? And that's it, Julie.
That's great, Shane. Thank you so much. We do have a couple questions, so get ready. They're good questions.
Okay.
So Barbie said, I think a person needs to know if they are a great host or a guest. I am more of a guest due to my purpose and mission. How do you know if you are going to be to become a great podcast host like Shane?
Thank you for that compliment. The only way you're going to know is if you try it. And that's really it. I mean, personally, you're talking to somebody since when I was very young. I hated my voice, I hated my looks, and I hated everything that I did. I self-loathed all the time. And yet this is what it is that I actually make a living out of doing now, is through my voice and through my looks. So, I mean, this is what it is that I would say is that you got to start somewhere, try it, see if you're comfortable with it. You may not be comfortable with it for a little while, but at the same time, it really depends on who it is that's following you that's actually making the difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And a follow-up question, and actually one that I have, is, how many people does it take to put together a podcast? Can you do it alone? Do you need a team? Do you have any tips on finding a team or finding a co-host?
Well, there's a couple ways that you can do things. I mean, you can do a podcast on your own. That is definitely possible. You don't have to do a weekly podcast like we do every single time, okay? You can do an every other week podcast. You can do a monthly podcast, whatever the case may be that actually fits into your schedule. Again, we're talking about health advocacy. We're talking about people who are not always feeling the best. So sometimes you want to have a schedule that's going to be a little bit ahead of what it is that you're doing. Now, as far as like a team wise, yeah, there's networks like myself, as to where we actually do all the back work. We get the guest, we get it to the point is we get the person there on the show, we get the recording, we do the editing and everything like that. Some people might say that might be a better way to go, but it all depends on what it is that you want to do. And of course, what it is that's comfortable for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there a cheap way to just, tip your toe in the waters of podcasting, that doesn't cost too much as an investment? What would your suggestion be?
you can do it for free. I mean, I don't know if that works. But, and this is what we're going to talk about in our second webinar, is a little bit more detailed on that. But to get it to be very clear, you can do, like I said, I used earbuds for my first podcast. So what are they, like $10? I think it was at the time. But you can actually broadcast at different little locations, whether it be Blog Talk Radio or Spreaker or whatever the case may be, where they have free source for you to be able to do it. Now it's a small increment, right? But you also can go ahead and you can record on your telephone. I mean, the reason why podcasting is going so berserk when it comes to the numbers of people listening and everything is because of the technology of the cell phone. Mm-hmm. Because 72% of podcast listeners are listening from a mobile device. So, you can actually do recording from your cell phone and you can listen to podcasts on your cell phone. So, and that actually works out again well with our audience when it comes to WeGo Health.
Right. So here's a question. If you have a blog already, so you have your blog, maybe you have a Twitter, things like that. Do you think that starting a podcast that is the exact same theme of your blog is smart? Or do you think that maybe it should be a little bit different or, have different undertones that would kind of pull people over to your podcast rather than your blog?
Well, first of all, it all depends on your audience. Your audience is going to determine that for you. Okay. Second of all, I write differently than what it is that I speak. When I write, I'm more grammatically correct, right? Or grammatically correct, whatever the word that you want to use. But when I'm speaking, I'm more fluent. I'm Italian. I move my hands around. I do a lot of different things, so I kind of express myself a little bit differently over when it comes to be on the podcast. So it's going to be a little bit different. But I would suggest if you do have a blog there, well, there's a whole lot of content that you can use on your podcast. And it doesn't have to be the exact same. It can have a little bit different of a taste to it. And then you can utilize that content, which is on your podcast, and then repurpose that content for your blog. So, I mean, it really can work hand in hand together.
Okay, switching topics to hosting, do you have any tips on thinking about whether you want to host it yourself or have a co-host? Any tips?
Well, I mean, it all depends on what it is. I mean, if you're somebody who is more comfortable having somebody with you, obviously you want to have a co-host. If you're somebody that's, somebody who is kind of like out there, you're kind of outgoing and everything like that, you're going to find out that your audience is going to kind of gravitate towards you. So that it just depends. Again, it's on the audience, but you really got to start in order to be able to find out what's going to work out best.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like, when you start your blog or you start a new social channel, you really have to fine tune what you're pumping out there based off of what's getting engagement and what your audience really wants. So.
Right, because you're looking at different likes, you're looking at comments and everything that's coming along with what it is that you're doing. So the same thing when it comes to podcasting. When we go ahead and we do our promotionals, we get likes, we get comments, and we figure out, oh, well, they like this particular topic. So we need to, look into this and maybe look at it from a different angle. There's a lot of different ways that you can repurpose content, and doing it between a blog and a podcast, really, it really works out well.
Yeah. Was there ever any points when you were doing, when you are doing interviews that you think, oh, this is great content, but maybe it's not as engaging with your audience in something else that completely shocks you, really resonates with your audience?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. The one that you think is going to be the best. I mean, the one that you are just like over the heels, this is the one, and then it's not. Yeah. And then next thing you know, the one that you're like halfway there and you're it's like, oh my God, they're not going to understand or whatever the case may be. And next thing you know, the numbers go through the roof. Again, that's why I keep on bringing it back. Your audience is going to tell you what it is that's going to be good. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that I found. I mean, like I did a podcast with Diamond Dallas Page. I've been a fan of his since I was very young, and I thought, man, this is gonna fly high, right? And it did. It flew pretty good. But then all of a sudden we did one which was with just an average person, and you know, it did 3/4 of what Diamond Dallas Page did. You know, so I mean, it really just depends on what it is that your audience is going to identify with and how it is that it works for them. Yeah. And you can only find that out by trying and by testing out things. And just like a blog, like you said, you know, there's going to be articles out there that you spend days on, right? If not weeks on, and throw it out there. And you think this is the best article I've ever written in my life. And for whatever reason, it kind of falls, you know, kind of slow. Then you go ahead and you say, well, I just want to get something out there, and you put up something, and next thing you know, you've got likes, you got comments and everything. So it's the same way.
Yep. This is really reminding me of our webinar that we did back in January. Go on our blog to check it out. It's with Bob DeMarco about blogging. And, you know, he really stressed the importance of having your mission, your vision, you know, really knowing exactly who you're writing to and what you're trying to accomplish when you're writing your blog. So, you know, when you're coming up with your podcast, writing down your audience, writing down your mission, writing down all of these things can really help frame you, frame your.
Well, content's content, right? I mean, it really is. I mean, what we do is that we live on content. When we're trying to get out to our audience members, we're using content. So no matter where you're using it, what medium you're using, you gotta get an idea of who's your listener, who's your reader, you know, who's your viewer, whatever the case may be, so as to be able to get them identifying with what it is that you do. And then they're going to get attached to it one way or another. And if they're attached enough, they're going to give you some ideas of what they want more. So, you know, I mean, that's why it seems so similar, is because, again, it's the word content.
Yep. Yep. Well, this has been great. Definitely, this is part one of your podcast, really finding that voice, who you're going to be speaking to. And I look forward to getting into our podcast part 2 here shortly. So stay tuned. We'll let you all know when that's going to happen. But thank you so much, Shane, for coming tonight and really, really enlightening us.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I just, you know, I'm very, very thankful to be part of the WeGo Health webinar family, you know, in order to be able to help others. You know, I go out, what I do is I empower voices, you know, so that's what it is that we do with the Speaking the Heart Radio Network. We're bringing people out so as to be able to empower their voice, so as to be able to get out to the people that they want to get to. Awesome.
Thank you. And here, remember, WeGo Health, we're always here to help you. If you are in our network, make sure to update your profile. If you're not in our network, make sure to create a WeGo Health account, and definitely make sure that you go and check out the experts platform, just even to learn more or to apply to be an expert. There are some really great opportunities coming down the pipe to create content, whether it's video or podcasting or blogging, or really helping and transform healthcare in a myriad of different ways. So definitely make sure to do that. Thank you so much, Shane. Be on the lookout for part 2 of the podcasting. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time. We're always here to help. And thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Enjoy your night.